What's up, you guys? We're here. I'm back in Demio. I feel like we're home. Um, Let me know how you're doing. Scale of 1 to 5. How you doing? 5 is like best day ever. 0 is like, ugh, not a good day. 4s. Okay, all right. Not bad, not bad. 3. Okay. When I woke up this morning, I was feeling like a 1. I just was like not having it today. But now I'm more like I'd say more of a 4. Definitely not best day ever. So just like, sorry for throwing you guys all over the place. I know, yes, last night we were in webinar jam, and I just like after hearing you guys your responses, and then also like my own experience with it, I was really frustrated by the fact that the lag was there, and there really wasn't any way that I could combat that. So I figured out a way to just like get you back into Demio registered so that it wouldn't really affect you as much. So we're back on this. Whew. Another thing that's really awesome is I just spoke to a calculus teacher who is like, we're pretty close to being able to say that we can definitely have AP Calculus, A, B, and BC this year. So I don't know if any of you guys are taking AP Calc, but let me know. Are any of you guys taking AP Statistics, actually? That would be one that would be interesting, but I'm not sure. You guys are probably mostly sophomores or freshmen, so maybe not. But if any of you guys are taking those this year, yeah. Senior year. Okay, so then we'll have it for you then. Joy, your period 3 review will be, it's uploaded. For some reason, my QuickTime is not letting me cut videos, so it just has all the like beginning and end fluff, but it is uploaded on Teachable for period 3, so you'll have to kind of go back and watch that. But basically what we did last night is just go through all of period 3, 600 to 1450, with a lot of focus on trade, on the big empires, on we have the Islamic empires, the Mongols, the Byzantines, the who am I forgetting? The Tang and Song in China. So those were kind of the like focus for last night. And then for today, we're going to practice writing an LEQ based on that information. So will AB reviews be all year or just starting in March/April? No, so the plan is to get reviews happening all year for every subject. For summer, to do like summer previews, like a few sessions in like August to just get you set up, and then to do less in the fall than we would in the spring, but to still like help you in class throughout the fall and then really help you review in the spring. So that's the goal. That's what I'm planning on doing with all the subjects that I'm bringing in. And I'm just super stoked that I'm hearing from other teachers that can teach some of these other classes that I can't. I don't know anything about calculus. So, and she sounds awesome. So I'm really excited to bring that in. Okay. So before I like really jump into LEQs, so LEQs are 6 points, and I'm curious from you guys, maybe you give me an average here of what you usually get, or you want to just say how you feel about them. But on a scale of 0 points to 6 points, where do you feel like you are with LEQs? Like if you had to write an LEQ right now, what do you think you would get on it? And maybe consider how you feel about it, or just past ones that you've done. And so maybe you can just drop that in there and just kind of think about, like, if you wrote one right now, just in general, like, how do you feel LEQs? Obviously, the content will be a big factor, but just like a general, so that I kind of know where we're at. And then also with that is like, what do you think is like is one of the rubric points that is the hardest for you to get? That one rubric point that you're like, ugh, I never get this point, or I just don't understand it, whatever. And then I'll try to really focus in on those ones. All right, so it looks like we're 4 or 5, 2 or 3, 3 or 4. All right, so you guys are kind of right in the middle. Those are pretty average. It's pretty good. So one rubric point is maybe it's thesis, context. Complexity is one. So if there's one that you just want to throw out there right now, because you're like, please, Amanda, please talk about this one. Like, this is the one that is so hard for me. And I'm going to get myself set up here. Application. Okay. Okay, so what I have for you, and let me actually maybe make myself way smaller. Whoa. Okay, so I've got practice prompt here that is for period 3. Whoa. Okay, hopefully you can see that. And this is, so since they've adjusted the exam, the LEQ prompts look different. So it's been kind of difficult. There aren't that many prompts released that actually look like the correct format. Even the ones that I've been posting in the Facebook group aren't totally up to the standard. But those ones just kind of help you think through some of the stuff. But this is what they're going to look like. So what I want to do with you guys is first kind of just go through like LEQs, like how to do them. Just a general like breakdown of like how I think through them, why you need to find them important. And then we're going to do this practice one together. Okay. So again, any questions throughout, please just drop them in. I'm going to be asking you guys questions to kind of get you thinking about period 3, but slow me down or, whenever you need to. So LEQs are 15% of your exam score. It's actually the smallest of the written portions. The short answer and the DBQ are worth more, but 15% is still a solid chunk of your exam. There's 6 points available on the rubric, right? So you're going to get either somewhere between a 0 and a 6 on the LEQ. You're going to have an option. They give you, 3 options? Let me just double check. So they're going to give you 3 options. Yep, here we go. This is a new piece as well. I think this is kind of awesome that they're doing this. So you've got 3 options. You'll basically choose between a prompt that's on periods 1 and 2, or a prompt that's on periods 3 and 4, or one on period 5 and 6. So you'll just do one. You've got 3 choices, and they're based on timing. So that's pretty cool. General things about the LEQ. You are not limited by any sort of writing thing. Like, you don't have to fit it in a box. It can be, as long or short as you want. Something that I think that you should just really focus on when writing your LEQs are just like focus on getting the rubric points, right? Every single sentence that you write should be either like getting you a point specifically or helping you to get a point, right? Every single sentence is attached to a point. How many pages of space do you get on the exam? I think you just get like a blue book, and so there's a pretty good amount of pages in there, plenty more than you would need. And the LEQ really, it can be as long as you want, but you can get full credit for the LEQ in, as short as probably 3 paragraphs, but that would be like a crazy LEQ. But I would say that it's mostly going to be somewhere between like 4 and 6 paragraphs. Right. And the thing is, like, you don't want to run on. You don't want to just like throw in every single thing that you could remember. You really want to focus on this. Every sentence should be attached to a point. So if you are writing beyond that, you're doing too much. So you can kind of scale back a little bit on that. So, okay. So the basic outline for the LEQ, this is what it would look like. Your first paragraph would be first context, or your intro. And in your intro, you'll have your contextualization, which is like 4 to 5 sentences. And then your thesis, which will be 1 to 2 sentences. I really push for thesis statements to be 1 sentence, but you can do it in 2. Then this is where like my layout for doing an LEQ differs from some other people, but I like this setup, but it doesn't work for every single thing. So one of the rubric points is complexity, and you can earn that using synthesis. So I'll kind of, or maybe we'll just kind of look at this for a second. Let's just look at the rubric for a second and really understand the different parts. So this is the AP History LEQ rubric. Let me just make this a little bit bigger so you should be able to see the whole thing now. I wonder if I make it even bigger, if you can see that. Oh, okay. All right, so this is the rubric. So you get a point for your thesis, right? You've got to respond to the prompt with a claim that establishes reasoning. You got to have an argument. Okay, so if the prompt is asking you about effects, you got to present effects. It needs to be something that's argumentative. It's not enough to just restate or rephrase. You've got to really like make a claim. Contextualization, this is where you're bringing in that like background that's you're like previously on, right? This is like some things that the developments that occurred right before or that are kind of continuing to occur in this time period. It's not enough to just like reference it. You have to really explain that. So that's why this needs to be 4 to 5 sentences. Then you've got 2 points available for evidence. You'll get 1 if you provide specific examples relevant to the prompt. So something you should know on the back end, the College Board develops a more specific rubric for every single essay in between when you guys take the test and when the readers grade the test. And so what they do is they figure out, based on some sample essays, they're going to quantify this number, this right here. So when it says provide specific examples, they're going to attach a number to that. So there is no actual number right now, but when they actually grade it, there will be. So the readers will know that the student had to provide 3 examples or 4 examples. There'll be a number. The highest I've ever seen that number is a 9, and that was a long time ago. The lowest I've seen that number is like 4. So you want to get somewhere between like 6. That would be a really awesome number of evidence points. And that will kind of make sure that you're okay. The way that you get the second evidence point is that you're really explaining that evidence, that you're connecting it to your argument. You're not just saying, here's an example. You're really connecting that back. And Dylan, it's 6 total in the essay. So again, they're going to quantify this later. You're not going to have any idea. But one way that you could even do like 3 pieces of evidence per paragraph. Like the rule of 3 is a common way that teachers use this. So you could have, and by evidence, I mean just like a key term. So just by naming a person, right? Naming like Silk Roads, that's evidence. And so you would need to do something like that at least 6 times. That's the goal. So the question is, we connect the examples back to our argument. How would you do that? I'm going to show you examples of this, but this is like when you would say, for example, the Silk Roads connected, and we'll do it when we write this example essay. Then you would have a second sentence that just explains that response. Okay. Then you have your analysis and reasoning. The first way that you earn this point is by framing your whole essay around the correct skill. So they're not going to necessarily be clear if the question is asking about causes or effects or similarities or differences. It's not going to like be labeled. You have to kind of pull that word, that skill out of what the prompt says. So if it's asking for factors, then you would write about causes, right? And so as long as your essay is framed around one of these skills, whether it's comparison, causation, or CCOT, this is how you'll get that point. And you can think about that like topic sentence, right? One way that blank changed between that kind of helps you get this point. And this is kind of an obvious one if the student is using the correct reasoning skill or if they're not. The second complexity point or analysis point is complexity. So this is where you have to go beyond what is, just basic explanation and really develop a more complex understanding. Show that you really understand that this is a larger development. And so this is where they really like to confuse you. And they've listed 5 different ways that you can actually earn this point. So you don't have to do all 5. You just have to do one of them once, right? Some of them are not just like a 1 sentence thing, but the 2 that I would say to focus on the most would be here. You can either explain both similarities and differences, or both continuities and changes, or both causes and effects. So if the prompt asks for factors, then you could also explain effects in a paragraph, and this would get you the point. Another way that you can do it is by this one right here, explaining relevant and insightful connections within and across time periods. This is your synthesis. So if you see a similar development that has happened in a different time or different place, you can earn the point by drawing those comparisons, by saying, Rome fell and it led to this vacuum of power, whatever, and that's similar to when the Soviet Union fell, and this is what happened in Eastern Europe. Whatever. That's just a basic example. But drawing a connection outside of the time period or outside of the region, you can do that. The other ones are a little bit more confusing, but there are other ways for you to do it. This one is better with actually, this one is kind of hard. So I would just focus on those two. So that's the rubric, right? Those are your 6 points. And so the way that you will organize your essay is you have your intro, you got your contextualization, and your thesis. So just by writing your intro paragraph, you should have 2 points already. Then I'm going to call this like a bonus synthesis paragraph. This is like if you've got a good idea. If you can do synthesis and you've got a great idea for it, do it. If you have a great connection to a similar development outside of the region or time period. So you can draw outside information for synthesis, but not evidence. Exactly, Andrea. So for in this bonus synthesis paragraph, and I'll just kind of put this in quotes, if the prompt is asking you something and you're like, whoa, the same thing happened in this other time period. I know about it. I know I can write a paragraph showing that development. Then write it. Do that paragraph right away. If you do that, then you have 2 paragraphs and 3 points. All right, we'll put this in bold. Like that could get you that complexity point. And so you would have a 3 just by having 2 paragraphs, which is dope. So if you want to get a 3 or higher on this test, total on the AP exam, you've got to get about half the points available. And so getting a 3 on the LEQ, perfect. Would a counter argument count as synthesis? No. Counter argument's not synthesis, but counter argument is a way that you can earn this point because you can look at nuance. You can look at other variables. Counter argument can be a little bit difficult in terms of some of these prompts. And in that case, you would want to just look at, if the prompt is asking you for causes, look at effects. So it's just kind of difficult. It's like there's so many ways that you can do it that I can't tell you this is the best way. It totally depends on the prompt and it depends on what you feel the most comfortable with. So if you feel like I totally get synthesis, I can do it, then do it. If you feel like I don't understand synthesis and instead I'd rather just write a counter argument or that, another effect or an effect rather than a cause, then do that. Either way, you've got to get this paragraph. But it doesn't have to go right here. It could go right here. So, okay. So then you'd want, let's say bonus synthesis slash, what is it? Like the opposite skill. The question's asking for. Okay, then in your body paragraph, number 1, this is where you'd have a topic sentence that would just be like, one effect is da-da-da. Then you'd have evidence, give, for example, this thing, and then we're going to do this. We're going to do a whole example. Introduce evidence, introduce a piece of evidence, explain it, and then do that 2 or 3 times. Okay. And then you do this again. And then the body paragraph again. Body paragraph number 2 will be the same. You don't necessarily need another paragraph. This one's like a bonus one. If needed. Body paragraph number 3. You may not need it. You may have already hit everything you needed to say. You might not even have a 3rd point. This isn't something that you absolutely have to do. And then again, conclusion would just be restate the thesis. In new words. So the thing is that you can get the thesis point in the introduction or the conclusion. A lot of times as you're writing, things become more clear to you the further in the essay you get. And so this is where it gives you that that section for, you can write a thesis point in your conclusion and still get the point. So, all right. So Dylan's question is, I had an essay that asked for 1 or more things. I did 3 things, but I would technically get it for 1. Depends on the prompt. If it asks for 1 or more things, I don't know. It would just depend. Sorry. Could we use ACE for each piece of evidence? Yes. So that's exactly what it is, right? This is your A. This is your C. This is your E. right? Let me actually write that. Each piece of evidence, do ACE. That's perfect. Beautiful. Okay, any other questions on just general, how does the LEQ work before we write a sample one together? You know, on the rubric, on the prompt, on the outline. Does analyze in a question mean positive and negative? Not always. Analyze can also mean like explain. It just depends on what it's asking for. Okay. All right, let's look at this prompt. This is the one we're going to do today. So the first thing, how do you form an argument when it says explain? Okay, so no matter what, it's going to have some sort of word in there that is tipping you off as to which skill you need to focus on. So, you know, for example, if it says, actually, I have a list. I got to find it. I found a list once of like all those words that might help you. But the way that you're forming an argument is to really, you're going to kind of say like, there's this many effects, but this was the most important. You could, positive or negative is another way that you can form an argument, but it doesn't always mean that. It just means that you're like pushing, you're presenting a way to answer this question. So let's look at this one. I think it'll be more clear to you. So this one says, in the period circa 400 to 1450, the decline and reconstitution of empires in regions such as the Mediterranean, Middle East, and East Asia affected the expansion or decline of cities across Afro-Eurasia. So they're always going to give you this like one sentence that just like has, it's just like a little bit of background. It's giving you a little bit of context to the prompt. So, you know, from this, we clearly have a time period, we have a place, and we have a topic, right? We know that we're going to talk about the expansion or decline of cities across Afro-Eurasia. So it's important to read that first bit and to understand what the prompt is going to ask. And then you've got the actual prompt. Develop an argument that evaluates how the process of decline and reconstitution of empires led to changes in urban development in Afro-Eurasia in the period 400 to 1450. It's a mouthful, right? Like what they give you is a mouthful. So you got to kind of break it down. So let's break this down. You know, it'll start with that kind of word: develop, explain, analyze. That's just like the beginning of these sentences. You know, develop an argument that evaluates. So this means that you have to evaluates is telling you what kind of argument to form, whether or not it was successful. Right? Like that's one way that you could do it. Whether or not it like how much of an impact it had. How the process of decline and reconstitution of empires led to changes in urban development. All right. So what is this prompt even asking? That's the first thing you need to really make sure you understand. I mean, what do you think? What is this prompt really asking you to do? Asking you to focus on? Oh, man. Let's think about it. Which reasoning skill is this prompt? Continuities and changes, CCOT. So, yeah, right. We've got a word changes in here. So you can definitely talk about CCOT. Develop an argument that evaluates how the process of decline and reconstitution of empires led to changes in urban development in Afro-Eurasia. So what you would need to do is basically say it's specifically talking about changes, right? And it's asking what led to the changes. And changes in what? Changes in urban development, right? Changes in cities, urban cities. And it's even actually giving you more here. The process of decline and reconstitution of empires. What does that mean? What does that phrase mean? Maybe there's a little lag on Demio too. What's that? What is that phrase talking about? Like, what is the focus of this prompt? Empires fall, and from the ashes, new ones form. Yeah, right. So we've got empire building, exactly. So empires falling and rising. How does those, basically, how did that change cities in Afro-Eurasia? Right, Africa, Europe, and Asia. So exactly. So what I would do first is really understand the prompt and almost like rewrite it. Like you see how this looks a lot easier than this, right? I just sort of kind of rewrote. I just kind of, and this could even been done better. But the empires in Afro-Asia falling and rising, how does that change the cities? So we have like a topic. You have like a catalyst, right? They want you to really focus on the rise and fall of empires and then really focus on change in cities. So if you talk about how the rise and fall of empires affected something else, it's not going to help you out. You got to focus on changes in urban development. And then you've got to stick within this time period as well. Okay, so once you have your prompt understood, then we got to do some brainstorming. So, first of all, how did the cities change? Let's think of some reasons. Just in general, how did the cities change? And then we'll connect those changes to the rise and fall of empires. So between 400 and 1450, what kind of changes are we seeing in cities across Afro-Eurasia? Okay, you started. These were based on trade routes. Yep. These are definitely based on trade routes. How else? What are some other ways that the cities themselves are changing? And, you can list some of the specific cities here. You could also talk about, I'm trying to find, you could also just in general, how are the cities changing? All right, I'm just looking for something to help us out here. Okay. Examples. Okay, let's see. All right. All right, what else we got? How else the city's changing? Gender equality. Okay, maybe we'll list that here. Cities, centers of culture, religious centers. Okay, let me make this. Okay. All right. So, yeah, so you could talk about any of those things. Pilgrimages. Right. Oh, that is not how you spell pilgrimages. That's another thing that you could talk about. And I even have for you some pretty good thesis statements that College Board has published. Oops. Whoever these. Okay. What about the population of cities? What happens to the population? Increase. Perfect. So the cities themselves are increasing, right? Population is increasing. What about the population of cities themselves? Overall population is increasing. Cities themselves is increasing. Okay, so now if we go back through these things, how did the rise and fall of empires affect these? Like, how do we get, like, what are some of the empires that are even falling, rising and falling here? You've got falling empires, you've got, Rome, you've got Mongols, you got Byzantines, Tang/Song, China. These are just a few. So how does the rise and fall of these empires, Han had already fell, affect trade routes, affect, population increasing, for example? Rome falls, becomes Byzantine, Abbasids come from whatever. Yep, so Rome to Byzantine, whatever there was before. Mesopotamia wasn't right before. The Abbasids would have been built more from like Persia. But okay, so let's just think about a thesis here. Okay, so you got to think about now, like, well, how am I going to actually argue this? And you've got to connect it to the empires in Afro-Asia falling and rising. And so, what are some of the effects of an empire having risen to power? Like, what's a general effect of that? And how does that affect the cities? Maybe we should have organized it like that, right? Like, because an empire rises, because the Mongols, for example, because the Mongols come to power, how do they affect the cities? Because the Abbasids / Umayyads, Islamic empires. So Vera, imperialism is going to be much more in period 5. We don't really see imperialism in the same sense here. New groups of people in new places. This may lead to new people using new trade routes. Yeah, well, just in general, right? The trade routes themselves can function when there is a power in place. Without that power, it becomes really difficult. So I'm going to actually zoom out a little bit here because I'm having some trouble. Okay, so if we like combine all of these things, let's just move this down. A lot more use of military power and destruction definitely could be a possibility. You also just have like new technologies, right? Like, so if we just ask ourselves here, like, how does the rise of cities affect, the rise of empires affect cities? How does the fall of empires affect cities? Well, so you guys just mentioned some new trade routes, or like more trade because empires provide security. What else? How does the rise of empires affect cities? More territories conquered, potentially, right? Some cities will fall when they are conquered. Like, new technology can increase the population of a city. New religions enforced within a city. Okay, how does the fall of empires affect cities? Spread of culture in the city, being conquered. Yep. Invasions, fall of cities, or like replace government / official religion. Disease, lack of food, decreased population. Yeah, more poverty. It's not great to live under not have like a strong empire to help you survive. All right, so when we actually put all this together, we've got a lot of ideas here. So now we need to actually just write our thesis. So let's see. Are those dates in the prompt super concrete? Like if I talk about something that happened in 1410, will it not count? So the dates are 400 to 1450, so you're good if you talk about 1410. you cannot talk about changes after 1450. So basically, yeah, so they're drawing the line because they don't want you to talk about the fall of Constantinople, but everything else is fair game. So you can talk about some of the other cities that are rising in this time period, some of the ones that we talked about yesterday. So if we think about a thesis here, you would write this thesis by first restating the prompt. And so you would want to say, you know, between 400 and 1450, the rise and fall of empires in Afro-Eurasia, and then use this, led to changes in urban development through and then that, so I'm just going to take the words from the prompt just like that, and then I want to actually choose 2 or 3 topics that I want to really focus on, 2 or 3 changes that really came about because of rise or fall. It doesn't imply that you have to talk about decline and reconstitution. That kind of implies that you'd have to talk about both. So I would maybe come up with 1 change as a result of decline and 1 change as a result of rise, because it says and here. That's kind of important. And they'll, you know, it's kind of hard to tell whether or not they would accept a thesis that just talks about one. So if it says and, you want to make sure you include both things. If it says or, then you get a choice. So we've got to kind of come up with 1 from each. So let's say we did, I don't know, let's say we do this one. I think this one is really doable. And let's say we did, I don't know, maybe like changing places of urban centers, right? That kind of includes both of those. So if we connected them, then it would look like through new technologies that led to an increased population in cities because of specialization of labor. And, let's see, the rise and fall. So I'm just going to edit this a little bit and then we'll see. So I might just write this is a process. All right. So it gets kind of messy. Rise and fall of empires in Afro-Eurasia led to changes. I might even just actually take this and, you know, say the rise, while the rise of new empires all right, forget it. Let me go back. The rise and fall of empires in Afro-Eurasia led to changes in urban development through new technologies that led to an increased population in cities, as well as the I don't know, the fall of cities. Anyone have a good thing to put here? The list for this last one. And between 400 and 1450, the rise and fall of empires in Afro-Eurasia led to changes in urban development through new technologies that increase the population in cities, and maybe we just lose it here, through like shifting locations for urban centers and new technology. Yeah, there we go. What do you think? All right, so this is one thesis statement. Okay, so if that's your thesis, and that's, you know, one example of a thesis, I actually pulled up one that was incorrect. This is one that they had as like, this is not, what's wrong with this one? So I'm going to look at this one for a second and talk about what's wrong with this one. This one said, during the period 400 to 1450, many empires declined, but these declining empires led to changes in urban development in Afro-Eurasia. Example of these empires include the Romans and the Han Dynasty in China. The fall of the Han Dynasty led to a rise of the Tang and Song Dynasty later on. With these two big empires falling, it made other empires realize what not to do in order to not fall. What's wrong with that thesis? Why would that thesis not get the point? Okay, so you guys said it doesn't talk about cities. The Han Dynasty was not during that time frame. Talks about Han, and didn't you say, yep? So so there's several things wrong with it. So you're all right. One is that it doesn't. The fact that it's talking about Han doesn't really do us any good because Han had already fallen before 400. It falls in like 220 CE. And then second, the biggest thing, Katie kind of nailed it on that. It doesn't even talk about cities. All this is doing is saying, here's what fell and rose, right? So that's like, you can't just do that. This one's not answering the prompt, so it would not get the point. So this is one I just kind of like wrote off the cuff, but I just went and grabbed one that College Board has said that this one would get the point. So this is one that a student wrote. The process of decline and reconstruction of empires led to great changes in urban development in Afro-Eurasia in the period 400 to 1450. The fall of the Roman Empire in 476 led to the decline of urban development in Western Europe as they went into the Middle Ages. The rise of the Abbasid Empire, however, assisted urban development because of their golden age of new developments and the rise of Islam. So like this is way more specific than mine is. And I think, either one is fine because you're answering the question. I think that's totally fine. And so for this one, like they have two sentences, actually have three sentences. And so I would have, if you were my student in class, I would tell you to push this into one sentence, just because I think it gets stronger. But they're clearly answering the question here, right? They're saying that there's a decline of urban development in Western Europe, but there's a rise of urban development in the Islamic empires. And that would be enough to even just say there's a rise, there's a fall. Seems kind of simple, but they are answering the question, and College Board has said this would get the point. Okay, so let's just go into actually writing this essay. So when you actually go in to write the essay, the first thing you're going to do is context. We'll kind of piece together our thesis after that. So what kinds of things would you include in the context here? What types of information would you include? Would they give you the point if you put a specific thesis or generalization? So you need a specific thesis. No matter what, you need it to be specific. I guess, in mine, I don't say, you could just add in here, after shifting urban centers in Europe. You could be more specific in that as well. The new technologies increase population in cities throughout Afro-Eurasia. Something like that. I mean, that's fine, but you'd have to be clear. Period 2, yeah. So you could talk about classical empires. You could talk about, Rome would give you some context, but not all. So in the essence of time, I went and grabbed what College Board said to do. So civilization started conquering, competition increased, causing more expansion into cities. Right. Increased competition. Silk roads for sure. All right, this is what they said. They suggested reasons why the fall of a previous empire led to the rise of the empire in question. Role of religions. These are just, you don't have to talk about all of these. These are just some options. Rise of hegemonic empire. So that hegemony just means like one group of people that all have the same characteristics. So like the rise of one group of people kind of pushing out some of the smaller states. And then changes interactions along the trade routes. Right. So, you guys kind of nailed it there. And I would just write, I would just kind of say, give a sentence in the classical era, and then give like something about what empires existed and like why they fell. Maybe you also talk about some of the other pieces as well. Like you just kind of choose one or two, but like what is it that you really need to know before understanding this? You might need to just really focus on the classical era, focus on the Silk Roads, or focus on increased competition. I think all of that would be useful. So let me ask you guys this question. So we got about 15 minutes left. I can either focus in on context and we can write out a good context, or we can write out a good body paragraph. So you tell me what you would prefer, context or body paragraph. Body. Okay. All right. So we're just going to skip context. Okay. So if we're going to do body paragraph, let's choose one of these things. So, let's talk about new technologies that led to increased urban centers. Okay. So the way that you would write a body paragraph, your first sentence would be like, one way that urban centers changed during the post-classical era was that populations of cities increased because of agricultural surplus, right? More food, more people. So let's give an example. What's an example of an agricultural improvement that led to a surplus and then allowed for increased populations? So cash crops are much more connected to period 5. That's your and period 4. That's your Columbian exchange stuff. But what's a specific thing, a specific technique or a specific crop in this time period that really affected the populations of specifically China? Rice. You are correct. For example, champa rice was a fast or, ripened faster than other than ripened much more quickly and allowed for multiple harvests in a year throughout China. Okay, so that right there, you're giving champa rice. This is your evidence. So then you would want, so you got your, for example, then you've got, because of this surplus of rice, not all, many farmers moved to cities because not all of them had to farm rice anymore, right? Like the other, some cities provided opportunities beyond farming, and the population increased as more people moved to urban centers. Okay, so something like that. So this right here, so just to highlight some, this first sentence here would give you your that analysis point. You're clearly talking about a change, right? One way that urban centers changed, that's important. Then this sentence here, this is giving you evidence. You're bringing up that evidence point. You're saying champa rice, that's your evidence. Then these sentences here are making sure to explain that. You're explaining, there you go. So that right there is leading you towards those 3 different points. And then you would want to, give another piece of evidence. What's another example of a technology or agricultural surplus that happened in this time period that allowed the population of cities to increase? Should we include what type of agricultural technology led to agricultural surplus of rice? So in this case, the actual the crop of champa rice is just like a faster ripening rice. You could theoretically talk about terrace farming. as another example of, yeah, Terrace methods. I mean, I guess you could talk about that in terms of, you know, maybe that could just be our second piece of evidence. Further, the use of terrace farming allowed for like more food production in regions such as Southeast Asia. But like, how do we tie terrace farming to an empire? That's the one key piece here that we're missing a bit. Use of terrace farming allowed for more food production in regions such as Southeast Asia. What were the, I forget the name of the empire in Southeast Asia, but I guess you could also attach it to Tang or Song in China too, in region, within the Tang and Song empires. As the population of the empire increased, the populations of cities also increased. That would be fine. This would give you your evidence point. More food led to a rise because more food helps grow an empire, equaling less revolts. Yeah, so more food equals more people, but that doesn't always equal less revolts. Sometimes more people equals more conflict. But you could say here, populations of cities also increased, and there were less competitions for resources with these surpluses. I mean, that's something that you could say. There was like stability. There were, you know, more stability. There, cities were more stable because there were less competitions. Yeah, there you go. That works. So this one would be pink. So that's basically what your body paragraph would look like. So you set it up with your like one thing, one effect, one change, one similarity, one difference, anything like that. And then give a piece of evidence. So make sure in that sentence you have a clear key term, right? Here's a key term. These are also key terms. And you might even get two here. So you want to make sure that that blue sentence that you write is really wrapped around a key term, and then explain it. That would be your pink. Explain it. That would be your pink. Okay, this is a pretty simple paragraph, but it doesn't have to be much more complicated than this. I mean, I think you could include one or two more sentences in the pink, but this is pretty much what you would do. And so in this whole essay, if you wrote this essay, you could make it so that this is one paragraph. Your second paragraph would be another change, and then you could write a continuity, right? And that would give you your complexity point, and that would be fine. All right, so not too many of you guys in here. I think a lot of people are getting kind of stressed. So if all our other paragraphs follow this format, would we theoretically get a 6? Theoretically, you would absolutely get a 6, right? If this is the way that your paragraph is set up, and you just really consider like what every sentence you're writing, does it align to one of the rubric points? Is it actually like just straight up picking up a point for you? Or is it helping you get closer to a point, right? Like if they say you need 4 pieces of evidence and you write 2 paragraphs like this, boom, 1, 2, and then you'll write 2 more. This is your analysis. It's all right there. Every sentence I have in here is helping me get a point. So, all right. So for the last few minutes, any other questions about period 3, about LEQs, anything like that would be useful to know? I think something else that we'll do is we'll do more practice LEQs. I think in period 5. For period 4, we're going to focus on DBQs, but in 2 weekends we'll do more LEQs. All right, so question was, it seems like time will be a big issue. So you have 40 minutes, 35 minutes. Let me check. You have 40 minutes to do this. So the biggest thing, my biggest suggestion in terms of, I'll make myself bigger here. My biggest suggestion in terms of timing is to really spend that time at the beginning organizing. Like when you like brainstorm out everything you want to say, when you really clear out your thesis in the beginning, then you're going to have a much stronger 40 minutes, right? So give yourself a solid 5 minutes at the beginning to just plan out everything you're going to write, brainstorm, outline, maybe even 10 minutes. Like it's okay, because that will exactly, right? Like you don't have to write all that much to get all the points here. So plan in the beginning, have a really good sense of what you want to say and what direction you want to go in. And then that way, when you actually start writing, you know exactly what you're going to do. How would you write a conclusion statement for this body? So like, you mean like a one more sentence in there? I mean, you don't necessarily even need it, but, you can just kind of wrap it up of like, for, let's see, you could just say, as populations or I don't know, like the rise of empires provides like stability. I'm kind of just repeating what's already there. You don't even really need another sentence. So a conclusion for your whole essay would just be like restating your thesis. You don't have to like repeat a lot of stuff because it's not going to help you. I mean, the thing is, you guys, it's like, as a teacher, as like a human, I want you to like write better. I don't want it to be all about the rubric, all about the points. But in terms of AP, in terms of you just getting these scores, it is all about the rubric and it is all about the points. So it's just a matter of just fitting in, just hitting the points where you need to. Synthesis is the conclusion. Yeah, you could do this. So at first last year, when synthesis was an actual point, I was teaching it as if students should write the synthesis in the conclusion. And then my students kind of pushed back on that and realized that if they just hit the synthesis first in their second paragraph, they were more likely to have the time to actually hit that point. So my suggestion is not to save complexity for the end in case you run out of time. You can kind of get it in there earlier. How would you connect it to the fall, or would you start talking about it? So it depends on if my paragraph is going to be about fall, then I would say when empires fall, then the city itself is going to be less stable. And here's some examples of cities that fell after this. You have the fall of Rome, for example. I would just kind of set it up like that. But just being really focused on your paragraph and being really clear about the argument you're making, the evidence that you're using to support your argument, and why you're using that evidence. It's no different than any other paragraph that you would write. It's like the basic paragraph structure. It's just really making sure that you're focused on those rubric points, that every sentence you write helps you get those points. Okay. All right. So any other questions before we end? And then a really quick question for you guys. Do these times work for you? The Friday at 8, Saturday at 6? Just out of curiosity, those were kind of laid out at the beginning, but I'm just, I'm preaching to the choir here because you guys are here, but just out of curiosity, if they don't work for you, I'd love to know that. If you feel like they do work, then great. Cool. All right. All right, so I'm gonna bounce out to Fiveable Light and do like a 20-minute thing. You guys are welcome to join. This is about DBQs and about grouping. And awesome. So before I log out, just if this session was useful for you, can you just hit a 1 in the chat? If you wish I talked about something else or explained anything, please then you can email me or mention that as well. Cool. Awesome. All right. So I'm so glad that you guys found this useful. Yeah, so Saturday nights I do AP US history at 8, so I can't go too much later. So, all right. So I will see you guys next Friday to do period 4, and you're welcome to jump in anytime during this week to do some Fiveable Light stuff. So until next time, I'll see you guys later.